Okay, we are live.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present. Can I get approval of the last meeting that was held, the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, ayes have it. We have two new pieces in front of us today. Our first one is ordinance amending and or supplementing Title IX, General Provisions, Chapter 93, Fire Prevention, Sections 93.40, 93.41, 93.53, and 93.73 of the codified ordinances of the City of Akron, Ohio, amending and regulations pertaining to fires and permitting fire pits and burn tables, amending and regulations pertaining to scrap rubber storage and requiring a permit, amending and regulations pertaining to fire department connections and hydrants, amending permit fees and declaring emergency. And I see we have a few representatives from the Akron Fire Department with us, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to them.
Good morning. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chief Tucker. I should have Beasley and Captain Haas on the line as well. I'm going to let them go into the details of the Title 93 changes that we'd like to make.
All right. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon, all. We want to start out with section 93.40. This will be fires. What we'd like to do is legalize the burn pits, fire tables, and burn tables in the backyards. What we're going to do is only allow charcoal, clean wood, liquid petroleum gas. That's the gas that comes in the containers for the barbecue grills, or natural gas lines to be used as fuel. So no scrap, no rubbish, no yard waste shall be allowed. The fire must be contained in a fire pit or burn table designed to and capable of containing the fire. All in-ground pits shall be no larger than 5 foot diameter or 5 foot square. Dedicated water supply will have to be within 50 foot, so a garden hose will be sufficient. Very important here, the fire pit or burn table must be at least 15 foot away from any structure. That includes a porch, balcony, deck, anything like that, anything of that nature. Any extra fuel should be kept a minimum of 10 foot away from the fire. So that's any firewood, charcoal, anything of that nature that you want to use for fuel.
Wait, hold. Well, the ordinance says 15.
Yes, it's 15 for the fire, 10 foot for the extra fuel.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that reads a little funny when you first look at it. The size, conditions, and means of maintaining and other aspects of the fire containment device and resulting smoke shall not present a safety hazard or nuisance. So in other words, they can't have a huge bonfire in their backyard. They can't have anything too close to their structure, to any kind of structure. It can't be too big. If it's saturating the whole neighborhood with smoke, it's considered a nuisance and it still has to be extinguished. So we're not deviating far from the original text of Title 93. If it's a nuisance, it still has to be extinguished. Fires kindled within the city of Akron for the purpose of cooking food for human consumption and use for recreational fire pits and burn tables may be ordered ceased if violations of this chapter exist or if a safety hazard or nuisance exists. Like if it's saturating everybody's houses, the whole neighborhood with smoke, the fire's too big, it's endangering nearby structures, it has to be extinguished. So that's where we're standing on that with the fire pits and fire tables. No balconies, porches, decks, no fires are allowed on any parts of those structures that are attached to a house. Does anyone have any questions on this so far?
Yeah, what I'll do is let's do, that's a good segue into, maybe what we'll do is we'll read each section and we'll take questions. So we'll start with this section. I do see Councilman McKittrick's hands up, so I'll start with him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Easley, I'm just curious, do you feel that this may decrease the volume of calls when people call and complain in regard to the open burns that aren't really as much of a nuisance as the caller might think?
Yes, I do, because a lot of the calls we go out on tend to be neighborhood feuds, or one neighbor calls on the other because he's got a burn pit in his backyard. I don't like it, so I'll call. If they know it's illegal, then they'll call. Now, well, hopefully this will be legalized. That means they have no reason to call. So this should cut our call volume down in that aspect.
Thanks, Chief. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Also, what we're trying to do is, if you look at the communities around Akron, they're all using fire pits and using fire pits regularly. Now, not everybody, in Akron or in our surrounding communities always does it safely. We think, just like you can go to Lowe's and buy a fire pit and use it, there's a way to do it safely, and there's the way to do it that's irresponsible. We think that we shouldn't be restricting our citizens if we lay out the rules of how they can actually use a fire pit safely. And it just makes it where you can, it's like for me, the people that are behind me live in another community, they can have fire pits, but I can't. So this reduces that restriction on our citizens, but also allows them the ability to have an open pit and do it responsibly.
Good, thanks. Our next one is Councilman Malik has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our fire department representatives. I guess a two-part question. First, I imagine this is in some ways prompted by COVID-19 and that folks will be increasingly outside and trying to keep warm, as the winter months go forward. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the degree to which that plays into this? And then two, it sounds like a great idea. Have we thought about, what kind of public education, public awareness would go along with this? I know that's something that the fire department is pretty strong in.
We do have a public education department or branch that falls under fire prevention. That's something we can task them with, getting out on our website and giving the public the information they need to know what fire safety concerning fire pits and burn tables, what they need to do to prevent any fires. As far as call volume, what we found out as of 10/15 of this year, we've had 588 open burn calls. We figured that on the FEMA website that it'll cost between $80,000 and $100,000 yearly for us to send fire apparatus and personnel out on the open burning calls. If we could find a way to decrease the number of calls by legalizing this and letting the public know that it is legal and they don't have to call as much, then we can decrease this expense to the Akron Fire Department and the city of Akron.
Okay, thanks. Our next person up is, I see Councilwoman Samples has her hand up. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. I just want to commend you all on bringing this amendment up. I do know Lieutenant Lash had met with quite a few of my residents about the open burning of wood, and it seemed to, a lot of them wanted to do it, but it had people calling on them, and they had expressed their frustrations to her, sent me some emails. So I'm just hoping at some point maybe we can stick it in a water bill or something, so people will know about it. But yeah, this is, to me, at least residents component, I think this is a good thing, and I think it should cut down on some of the costs.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Let me see if anybody else, any other council members, like Councilman Swirsky, go ahead.
Yeah, just, this sounds like a good idea. If you don't mind, I like to grill and I use a smoker. What is a burn table?
A burn table is the metal fire pit that you can pick up from Lowe's or Home Depot. This is the one that there's one that you burn with wood. So you can go and pick up a cord of wood and you can burn the clean wood in your in your burn table in the backyard. There's also the liquid petroleum gas supplied ones. So those are the ones with the decorative rocks or the lava rocks on top of it. Everybody crowds around it and drinks their wine or their hot cocoa. You're just using LPG instead of wood or charcoal.
Okay. So like hardwood pellets, which are popular with some people, including myself, that's okay too.
Yes, as long as it's
No.
clean wood. We do not want to do yard waste because that stuff tends to put off a lot of smoke. Then it becomes a nuisance.
Okay. So if people collect branches, different things in their yard, bring them in their backyard and make a fire, that will not be allowed. That will not be allowed. Okay.
That's
But if there's some container and they're cooking or using it for a purpose like that, then it's okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. Good question. If we're ready to move on, Chief, we'll move on to section 293.41.
Okay, 93.41. What we'd like to do, I'm sure everybody's seen the number of tire shops that are popping up around town. A lot of them have very sloppy storage. We'd like to be able to get into these structures and monitor the amount of storage, find out how they have the scrap rubber, the tires stored in each business, so that it can be regulated and it will decrease the risk to ourselves and the risk to the fire risk throughout. So what we'd like to do, if we'd like to get back in line with the state mandates of how many tires they can store on their property. The first one is going to state we're going to go from 20 to 500 tires within a 56 foot radius of any property line. Now, it used to be 150, but a lot of the tire shops around the city, they sit right up against the next property line. A lot of them would not be able to continue their business if we enforce the 150 foot rule. A lot of them would be done. They couldn't operate. So what we've done, we've gone to the 56 foot mandate for 500 tires or over, which is the state mandate. But on top of that, what we've done is we've gone from 2,500 cubic foot down to 2,000. So they can't store as much scrap rubber on their properties. If it's below 500 tires, it will be not within 25 foot of any property line. So it's not as restrictive in that aspect of it. But what we've done is we're going to institute a checkoff program that's done yearly. Every year, we're going to go inside the building. We've developed this checkoff sheet. It's going to tell us how they store, how long the aisles will be, how tall they can be, if they're stored on tread or stored on their side. Everything has to fit in according to what our mandates are. If they fit into everything that we ask them to do, then they get permission to operate for that year. And we want to charge a $50 fee for each business. If they do not meet our standards, then they can't operate until they become compliant. So what we're doing is we're trying to reduce the safety risk to our personnel, to the people that work there, and reduce the fire risk.
Okay. Chief, I do have a question on this one. So let's go back to A, right under scrap rubber storage. It says no person shall pile or cause to be piled scrap rubber or more than, obviously we had 20, but now we're moving to 500 rubber tires. So basically a scenario I'm thinking about is, let's say Arlington Street, I have a couple tire shops and I look at them as very small businesses. So we're saying that they're allowed 500 tires on that property.
That is the state mandate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'll disagree with that.
I understand.
Yeah.
So
I
if
mean,
I can add in a little something. So That's the whole reason we want to go into a permit. We want to require a permit for these tire businesses because we have seen the problem. We've seen what they do right now. Right now, 90% of these businesses are already not in compliance with the state. However, we're not getting there as quick as we should. We go there when there's a problem. We go there when we can. But if we require them to have a yearly permit fee, they're going to be calling us and saying, hey, I need to schedule this inspection. And what our plan to do when we roll it out is to send out the checklist to all of them, let them know that, hey, starting at this date, we're going to be holding you accountable to meet these requirements. And then we're going to go out, we'll do the inspection, we'll write up the violations. They will not get a permit at that point. They'll get the permit once we do the recall and all the violations are corrected. But right now, in order to be fair to each and every business, we want to charge this fee so that they know it's coming, and we want to let them know you're all going to be held to the same standards. Because right now, if I go to one business and what they're going to say is, well, what about the business down the road, or what about the business across the street, or down, in the north side of town? We want to regulate it across the board by charging a fee and requiring them to come to us to remain open and to get this permit.
And is this a yearly inspection?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll go with it, I guess, but I just want to voice my concern for the record that, I'll use Arlington Street, for instance. I have several tire shops throughout my ward, but these are right in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And you launch 500 tires that are on fire. That's
well, here's
that's
the thing.
pretty big.
They won't.
Go ahead.
If you think about it, they can't even reach that. So they have to have 25 feet from the structure and 25 feet from the property line. So you think about those same tire places, they won't be able to do that. They won't be able to get 500 tires 25 feet from the business and 25 feet from the property line. So really what they're going to have to do is come up with another way to store these tires. So right now they're all kind of operating outside the state's parameters, but in order for us to mandate it, we want to come at them with across the board, everybody treated the same, each tire place is treated the same, let them know what's coming, and then lay it out there for them.
And then one more thing. So basically the permit and the process for inspections is yearly. And then if you go out there, the fire department, obviously, if you see violations, they just you give them citations or order to complies.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they get a reasonable amount of time to come in compliance.
All right.
We should see like
thanks.
the first
If
year.
we look at letter, go ahead, Mike.
I would say the first year, we're not going to get everybody right on line the first year. We'll be working towards it because they all be trying to come in compliance. And then each year we should see significant improvements. At least that's what we're hoping to see.
Okay.
If we look at letter B, no person shall pile scrap rubber in an area exceeding, and the change is from 2,500 cubic foot to 2,000 cubic foot. This is where we are more restrictive than the state mandate. So that helps us with the 500 tires. They still can't store as many. We're actually cutting down the amount that they can store with letter B.
Okay, got you. One more question and I'll move on. And this is kind of like really same subject, but getting off a little bit. But I know we have a lot of problems with dumping of the tires in our neighborhoods and parks and et cetera. Now, is there any way that we, as the fire department or zoning or something, can try to see if we can try to make sure we have a watchful eye on that?
Yeah, that's where that 20 tires comes into effect for these other properties, less than 20, because some places, some people, they'll have a whole bunch, but yeah, that gets into the housing and nuisance and all that. So in that case, we got to all work together to regulate that.
All right, thanks. Well, I see we got some questions. So I'll start with, let me see, Councilman Swirsky first. I got a couple council people.
Okay. Well, yeah, the 500 tires that the state allows, I don't think we have to be bound by that. I don't like that. I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm also uncomfortable with the sight of small groups of tires easily seen from kind of like carelessly stacked, sort of just mumble jumble around in some sites that I see that as you drive by, you walk by, there's a bunch of tires laying there and they're not carefully arranged or secured. And so I'm wondering, does this do anything about that? If we could have some instructions for how should tires be stored, no matter what the number, what safety requirements. I see some distance from some language here about distance from the borders, but I don't see any like how should they be held in place. Can they be piled on top of each other? Should there be chains around them? Is there something in here, Mike? There's a lot here in this ordinance, and I think we ought to take a little bit of time before we agree to something here. I mean, it's probably got 90% good. There might be a few things that I would like us to look at more carefully, maybe.
Well, we have a real stringent checklist that's going to cover all the things you talked about. And this, like I said, really the only thing that's going to change what we're asking you from the council members is to allow us to charge a fee to do so. Because really anything else we're already obligated to do. It's just, we want to roll it out as an all-in-one thing saying, hey, we're charging a fee and we're going to start on this date and we're going to come to every tire company and we're going to enforce these rules that are already in place by the state. And it's going to stop what we're seeing now because like I said, 90% of what you see out there is they're already not in compliance with the state. Mm-hmm. So we're not saying, hey, yeah, you can store 500 tires. We're saying that if you have the proper distance, which they don't, most of them don't, if you have the proper distance, then you could potentially store up to 500 tires. So we're not going out there to say, hey, yeah, go ahead and put 500 tires here or there. We're going out to say that, hey, if you have the distance and the property to do so, you can. But I don't see most of these ones that we all see as a problem are going to be able to do anything but make their stuff way safer than it is now.
Yeah, is someone inspecting them now, or is that new too? Just
There's already a new program we're starting.
It is. Well, we're inspecting them now. We do inspect them now. Yes, the answer is yes. But the problem we're running into is when we go to building A, then they immediately start throwing, well, what about the business down there? What about the business down there? And so we notice that as a problem when we're going out individually to inspect them. How can we let everybody at once know that, hey, we're coming for every single place the same way? So this is just a way to standardize it, if you will, to let them know that every year everyone's being checked. So that won't even be in the question.
Okay. Right now there aren't. Just let me one last. Right now there's no permits.
Right now there are no permits.
Right now there's permit, but
so that's a big change. That's really good. Okay.
I think we realize that we have a problem with our scrap tire storage facilities here in Akron. What this gives us the ability to do is once we go in and inspect, instead of when we walk out the door, then they know we've inspected it for the year and they can just do whatever they want in an unsafe manner. They know that if we catch them doing something safe, we can pull their permit and they're out of business.
Good.
That's what this will give us the ability to do. So, and again, what we're trying to do is not put folks out of business, but allow them to work and do business safely. So if they meet all of these rules that we're putting down here, then they'll be able to operate safely. And if they try to pull a fast one where they try to, okay, now we've had our inspection for the year, so they're not coming back all year, we can do what we want. If we catch them, we pull the permit and now they're out of business.
Can you provide us with that checklist you referred to?
Yes, so I have it right here. I can read some of the outside stuff if you want. No, but I'm just saying, I can read a couple of the things for the outside that covers just what you were asking. So one of them says all tires stored outside, no higher than 8 feet. All tires stored outside in groups, no larger than 250 square feet. And this next one's key. It says all groups of tires stored outside, a minimum of 50 feet from each other. So with these restrictions, I can go down the list, there's a whole list, but with these restrictions, it's going to make it awful hard for them to be able to store these large quantities that they're storing now. Because in order to follow this checklist, and this is a checklist we got by doing extensive research from other cities that have these storage checklists. So we took that checklist and we took all the things from the problems we are seeing throughout the city, And this is going to do nothing but make, like I said, each place safer. But yes, we can definitely provide it to you.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll ask Deputy Clerk Sarah to make sure we get that copy if it's via email or in our mailbox.
Yeah, I'll send it to her
Moving
today.
along, I do got two other council members here. I got Councilwoman Samples and Malik. So Councilwoman, go ahead. You're on mute.
Yep, yeah, thank you. I share the same sentiments as Councilman Kamer as it relates to these tire shops, especially on Arlington Street. It is such an eyesore. I've met with Brian and John several times about what we can do about these tire shops and the dumping of tires, which has become a chronic issue in this community. So one thing I'm hoping maybe we can look at a little further now that we're bringing this in with these permits is maybe thinking about if we're going to make them require a permit to store 500 tires, which again, like Mr. Kamer said, I think is kind of crazy to have that many tires in a small tire shop. But if we could think about the ones who, when you get a tire fixed, they tell you can leave your tire for $3 extra and they'll dispose of it. And they're not doing it. They're just dumping them in vacant houses and vacant parcels. I mean, I had a street over off of Johnston Street where they had a whole entire, they created almost a chop shop for tires where people were bringing their tires there and dumping them. The whole street was full of thousands and thousands of tires. So if they're going to be required to permit, maybe we need to have them have to tag these tires with the serial number of that permit. So if they're going to take tires from people, I think we need to know where those tires are coming from because they're dumping them everywhere. I had a tire shop on Arlington that was dumping them. One side of Arlington belongs in Ward 5, the other belongs in Ward 7. They were taking their tires from one side of the street and dumping them in a vacant building of the other one. And everyone's calling everyone trying to find out how they can get rid of these tires. And it's a problem. And I'm hoping the permits are fine, but we've got to figure out what are we going to do about them dumping these tires. Some of them know they can't have more than 500, but then some of them are people who are getting tires from them and paying that extra $3. And then we, the residents and council people, are having to deal with these tires being dumped all over the city and not knowing who to call or where to go. Or maybe we need to talk to the state about changing the amount of tires they're allowed to have since the state mandated. But it's good to have a permit, but we've got even a bigger problem outside of that, and it's them dumping these tires.
Okay, just so you know, so the state's not saying you can have 500 tires. The 500 tires is just a number that they came up with. This is for outside storage. That's just a number they came up with because they had to have a set number. They're saying the most you could store is this. But again, these companies are not going to be able to store more than a couple hundred outside their business, if that, because of the strict requirements of how you have to stack them, how far from the building, how far from the property line. So you're going to see that those numbers significantly go down because they just can't do it. You go down Copley Road, there's 2 tire shops right on Copley Road in between 2 buildings. Those tires are, all those tires, every last one of those tires are going to have to go because they can't meet that 25 feet requirement. So these tires are going to get cut down like you wouldn't believe. These tire shops, they're going to have to find some storage, some other way to store these. Or like you said, when they purchase those tires, they're going to have a way to get rid of them a lot quicker than what they're doing now. So believe me, this is gonna clean these things up within the first year. I mean, you should see tremendous strides in these places in the cleanup of them.
Good.
Not up on the 500 though, because that's just a number the state put on there because they have to have minimum for bigger businesses like Goodyear, places that have huge properties that can store these. That's what the 500s were. These mom and pop places, they're going to be barely able to keep 100 tires outside, if that, by doing it with these strict rules.
All right, thanks. We'll go to Councilman Malik and Councilman Fusco.
Thank you very much. I guess, my concerns are in line with some of the other concerns raised by folks. But I guess two questions. First, I think you might have just answered it, but there is a difference between the state saying what is permitted and the state saying that local governments cannot create a restriction that is less than. So just to be clear, is there anything in the state law that says that we have to allow 500 or that we cannot make a lower restriction? And if so, can we have a citation to that? That's the first question.
Yes, we can always be more restrictive than what the state wants.
Okay, well, that's helpful. The second question is kind of with the compliance. I mean, I like the idea of having permits. I think that that's great. And I recognize that we're all working with, you know, a lot of capacity issues, right? We want to get to more things than we can. I mean, what happens if, you know, we have the continuing non-compliance and now there is allowance to, you know, have 500 tires and there isn't the stacking and distancing that's required? And, you know, are we, you know, we're going to give them a year to get in compliance with the permit and then shut down those that don't? I mean, because we could be in the same situation where, you know, if most of them don't comply, we're faced with shutting most of them down. Is that something we're planning on doing or willing to do?
We would approach it the same way we do all of our other inspections. We would give them a time frame, and that could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days to become compliant. If they're not compliant within that time frame, then their permit would be pulled and they couldn't operate.
Okay, thank you.
If I could jump in as well, this is John York. The order to comply can be followed with fines, which tend to get owners' attention, and then ultimately there could be prosecutions as well. These would be third-degree misdemeanors. That would be a last resort, but it's a possibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Councilman Fusco, and we'll move on, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. No, I applaud the efforts. This is fantastic. It's a great mission. The questions though is for Mr. York. Just moving forward, I mean, why is it under the zoning code itself? Moving forward, obviously some would be grandfathered in, but I like the discussion referenced the limiting the amount of tires. Why couldn't it be limited based on the amount of square footage for a parcel moving forward whenever they come in? Because we have had a few tire store type places come in for zoning. Could we change the zoning code on that, Mr. York, or would
Well,
that?
the problem with regulating in a zoning code is non-compliant or non-conforming uses have to be grandfathered. And
That's what I said.
you don't want to grandfather. This is more of a safety issue. So there's no grandfathering here. This is a safety regulation. So it would apply across the board starting as soon as it's passed.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, thanks. All right, if we can, we'll move forward. Good question. Very good dialogue here. We'll move to section 3, 93.53. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, 9353 is fire hydrants. What we'd like to do is to regulate the conditions of fire department connections. We'd like to add provisions to appliance placement and labeling to be applied during the plans review process. So that's when we get the plans from the Summit County Department of Building Standards and we put our requirements on those. These provisions will make things safer, easier, and more efficient for fire companies responding to an emergency. So section B number 3, what we want to do for all new constructions in any building that's getting a fire suppression system upgrade, the fire department connection. So that's where the fire department pulls up to a building, a high-rise building that's on fire. We hook up to the connections you see on the outside of the building. Typically, those are 2.5-inch fittings. We'd like to move those to a 5-inch storage fitting, because that's the standard fitting on all of our trucks now. This, we can flow more water through. We can flow more water through it faster, and it's an easier and quicker connection. We want this FDC to be located outside the building collapse zone if possible. So that's typically 1.5 times the height of the building. So if we're working at a high-rise fire and the building is unstable, we don't want to have our personnel and fire apparatus inside of the collapse zone if anything were to happen. We want the fire department connection within 100 foot of a hydrant, preferably 30 foot. 100 foot of a hydrant is the state mandate. I'll give you an example. 1500 Marion, off of Hawkins, the high rise right behind the McDonald's. The closest hydrant is on the other side of the building. It is on the street side, but the fire department connection is at the rear of the building. And it's very, very complicated and cumbersome to hook into that connection. There's a lot of distance. There's a hydrant across the street on Hawkins, the opposite side of the building on Marion, and there's another one about 300 foot away from it. So that makes it hard for us to do any type of quick and efficient fire operations at that building. So those are the things that we want to try to get away from in the future. Number 6, we want to have signage on all new construction buildings and any building getting upgrades. So what we want to do is have a fire department connection sign or FDC sign labeled in 6-inch red letters, 6-inch red letters, including the signage will be an address of the building in 2-inch red numbers, and the signage shall have a white reflective black background. That way we can see it at nighttime. Number 7, all private fire hydrants should be painted red. A private fire hydrant is a hydrant that's not maintained by our hydrant division or anyone with the city of Akron. Some of the apartment complexes, I don't want to say Timber Top, I'll say Pheasant Run over on Hall Avenue. All of the hydrants on their premises, those are all private hydrants. We don't maintain them, so we don't know how much water comes out of them. If we don't know how much water comes out of a particular hydrant, we have to count it as what's called a red top. That's 0 to 500 gallons of water. So if we paint all those red, we already know it's a private hydrant. We don't know if we're going to get anything more than 500 gallons per minute out of that hydrant. So that'll make things a little easier and less confusing for us. The very last one is the installation of a weep or drip valve. This is a component of a fire department connection. If that fire department connection is charged in cold weather, once it drains, the water that remains in it will freeze. This weep valve is responsible for letting that water out of it. What some of the contractors have been doing is when they pressurize it to test the system, they don't install this valve. It has to be something that's installed after the fact, and a lot of the contractors are not putting that valve in. So we want this to be witnessed by a member of fire prevention to make sure that these valves are in place and that the contractor's not cutting corners.
Good. Any, we'll see if we got any questions. I'll look at my hands up first. I don't see nobody. Anybody else? All right, with that, we'll move forward. Go ahead, Chief. Go under to section 4, 93.73 per.
The 93.73 fee permit and schedule. What's been going on is we go out and we do fire watches, say for the fireworks downtown. The Mayflower Manor downtown has a very defective alarm panel. What happens 2-3 o'clock in the morning, we get the alarm drop there and the fire companies can't reset that alarm panel because it's so old. We have to call an inspector out to come and do a fire watch. If a fire alarm system's impaired, state law says there has to be a fire watch performed in that building. If there are no inspectors available, there's been more than one time that myself as a district chief have been tasked to do fire watch in that building. We charge $50 an hour. My overtime rate is approximately $75 an hour. So when that happens, the city is losing money. We want to try to get away from that. This has happened a few times since I've been in the Fire Prevention Bureau. So we'd like to raise that to $75 an hour. I've called around the state, Toledo, Columbus, Cincinnati. Their minimum time frame is typically a minimum of 2 hours. Okay. So we'd like to push that fee to $75 an hour for fire watch. And a 2-hour minimum. And we'd like to upgrade that on our fee schedule. Basically, we're trying to stop the city from losing money on the fire watches because even the captain's overtime rate is higher than what we charge.
Okay. All right, let's see if we got questions. Any questions? Nothing. Nothing. So moving forward, I mean, I'll applaud you folks for doing this. I'm really on board with it. I like us moving forward to go and inspect these tire shops. Obviously, I think as a ward council person, and I'm probably going to speak for everybody that's on the committee. You know, we get a lot of phone calls about these tire shops, and so I think this is the right move in the right direction. I think you explained it pretty good about the 500 tires with the square footage and the property line and everything. That's just kind of like, it really puts that number right in your face. The only request I have is hopefully moving forward, once we get this passed and everything, hopefully you folks can hopefully work with our neighborhood assistance department just to make sure, because I know we deal with them a lot with, you know, junk vehicles on these properties. The places are eyesores, so hopefully we can just communicate with them. Hopefully, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll ask the committee what they want to do. I mean, I'm okay with time or consent agenda, but I'll leave it up to the committee.
If you don't mind, I'd like to make one comment.
Yeah, Chief, please.
Sure. These new rules for the scrap storage of tires is really going to clamp down on these tire shops. So you are going to get some complaints. So be prepared. They're going to be complaining to you about it because they haven't clamped down like this before.
I understand. I think we're prepared for it, to be honest with you. I'm ready. I think this is long overdue. So thank you, Chief. Thank all three of you for your hard work on this, and all the firefighters within the Akron Fire Department. So if there's nothing else, I don't want to cut anyone off or anything. I'll let the committee decide on what they want to do.
Chairman Cameron, I'll make a motion for suspension of the rules.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Councilman McKittrick. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, so everybody's on board. I appreciate it. And I really think at the beginning of this, I really wanted to take some time and digest it, but you three really explained it pretty good. So thank you so much. So, all right, with that, we'll move on to our next piece. Thank you. All right, our next piece is authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of advertising for bids with Fujitsu for the purchase of up to 24 Fujitsu laptop computers for use in police cruisers and declaring emergency. I believe we have Captain McCosey with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a piece of legislation to allow for the purchase of 24 laptop computers that we use as MDBs in the cars. As a part of our coronavirus response, we went to a distributed workforce, which in short means that we sent a lot of folks in different directions to, in some cases, different city buildings, in some cases, different buildings that we operate. Moved them into different workspaces, and a part of that was having to get them a computer to work on. And so what we did at the time, because we had to move quickly, was took the computers off the shelf that we had earmarked for replacing MDB computers that are in the cars. So what this is for is to replace those that we have, the computers that we need to do the scheduled replacement for computers in the cars. This is money that we had received from a grant from the Department of Justice as part of our coronavirus emergency supplemental funding. And this was right in line with the budgeted amount that we asked for in that grant. So that's in terms of the Bright Computers portion of it, they are a sole source provider that we have used for these types of computers. They're the only dealer that we can work with for this particular type of computer.
All right, Captain, sounds good. Let me see if we got any questions. I'll do the raise your hand option first. Yep, we got Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Captain Magosi. I think that one of the things I've really learned during these reimagining public safety working groups, I know a lot of us have become aware of, is just the amount of advanced technology that you have, particularly the MDB software. So I in favor of anything that makes sure that we're able to continue using that software. Just a quick question, two quick questions, I think. First, what's the life cycle for replacing the cars in the cruiser, the laptops in the cruisers? And then second, what's sort of the status of the distributed workforce? I know a lot of folks are not working in stubs. Do you know roughly what a timeline is, or is it sort of, again, like with most things, kind of up in the air with COVID?
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. As far as the life cycle goes on these things, typically it's 5 to 7 years that we expect out of a computer. And to put that in perspective, our cruisers, we rotate those out as part of our equipment replacement program. But when we replace a car, then we move it to an A car, so to speak, or an alternate car, and then put the new car in service. And so our cruisers, in a lot of cases, could last 7 to 8 to 9 years, depending on how we have it assigned. So we use them for quite some time. So the life cycle of the computer can expire before we're actually ready to send the the vehicle itself for retirement. So that's the reason why in some cases we have to replace the MDBs before we replace the car itself. So that, I hope that answers your question. To your second question about the distributed workplace, that really is out of our control. As long as we have the problems that we have with coronavirus, we're going to do whatever it takes to protect our workforce and maintain social distancing within our workspaces. And a part of that really is distributing our workforce and keeping them safe so that we can minimize the effect of this illness on our workforce.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that, obviously we really, safety forces with police and fire have been, most directly impacted by COVID and city staff. And we really appreciate, folks doing their job in a more difficult environment during that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. To any other questions or comments for Captain in regards to this? No?
Yeah, just
Go ahead.
yeah, we all want best practices for our police department. The use of computers easily accessible in the patrol cars just fits in with that well. And thank you guys for the daily grind that it takes being part of our police force. Appreciate it. Thanks for looking down the road for all of us.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilman. So, Captain, moving forward, what's your, what would you like us to do with this? The consent agenda or suspension of the rules?
We would like a suspension of the rules if possible, so we can move on this as quickly as possible. The longer we wait, the longer it is before we can get these into the cars and out on the road.
I'd like to make a motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
I have a motion from Councilman Malik. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilman McKittrick. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, with that, we'll pass that this evening. Captain, thanks for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time. We much appreciate it.
And with that, thanks, council members, for joining us. We're adjourned. Thanks.
Our next committee meeting is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting that will be chaired today by Councilwoman Amobian. Committee members are Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo, and all committee members are present. So Councilwoman Amobian, you can get started whenever you're ready.
like to call the meeting to order. All members are present except Ms. Freeman, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that correct? Minutes from the previous meeting?
So moved.
It's been
Second.
moved. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Okay, the minutes are approved as presented to us. We have, I don't think we have anything on the previous agenda, do we, Sarah? We don't have any old business, do we, Sarah?
We don't.
Okay. No old business. We have 3 items for today, new items. And Mr. Fricker, we'll go to item number 1. It is ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of advertising for bids with Ernst Inc. Is that Ernst? Hold on a minute. My print is so small. No, Entrust Inc. to purchase hold on a minute. Get this print up. To purchase a 1-year renewal certificates necessary to secure the city's, hold on a minute. The city's websites and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Councilwoman Amobian. So I'm going to have Ms. Goodrich present this piece, but we're going to go through the 3 pieces, and then we actually have an update for council, just a quick financial update that, like we talked about last time, it's just kind of updating council on our revenue receipts and our expenditures, and a little bit of a highlight of some of the CARES funding that's come in and what we've been able to do with those dollars.
Very good. Thank you.
In regards to this piece, Entrust is what we use for all of our digital signatures that we use to secure our websites for internal and external access. Any of our websites that start with HTTPS, we need to have a digital certificate for. So this is a service that we use on a yearly basis, and we just need permission to go ahead and procure it without competition.
Okay. Are there any questions from the community members? Any questions from council members? Okay. Do you need this to pass tonight, or you want to put it on consent agenda?
Consent is fine.
Okay.
I'd like
May
to
I
make
have-
a motion for consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then did you want to go ahead and do the presentation now so we can go over the financials and what we've done before the next 2 pieces?
Yeah, I was going to suggest we wait until after the pieces, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The sets amending ordinance number 83-2020 passed March 20th, 2020, which established the annual appropriation for the current expenses, other expenditures, and the capital outlays of the city of Akron for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency. Is this the correct piece? Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's the second item.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm on my phone. I can't see everything.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is our first appropriation amendment to the original budget that was passed back in March. I sent a memo out to each of the council members a couple hours ago that highlights that. We have Cindy Donnell, who is our audit and budget manager, is just going to kind of cover some of the highlights. Many of these are related to grants that we've received throughout the course of the year and are now appropriating. The big piece is going to be the appropriation of the CARES Act dollars. So Cindy's just going to cover some of the highlights of the appropriation amendment.
Okay, so I don't want to read the whole memo to you. More than happy to answer any questions. But as Steve mentioned, there are quite quite a few dollars that we are appropriating now in the budget that relates to grants. So within the general fund, the largest increase is going into municipal court judges, and that is to allow them to spend the funds for their new technology grant. Within the health department, it is another large increase, but it is for those of you that remember our former health department employees. As they retire from Summit County, we do have payouts that we're obligated to give them. So that's a budget increase there. Moving down along, there are a couple different sections within the budget amendment where we are not increasing the budget, we're just realigning the budget. So in section 4, when we look at the Community Environments Grant Fund, we're reducing the budget and other and just moving that to the wages category to allow where the actual expenditures are occurring. A similar one is in section 7, where we are actually taking budget out of police other and reappropriating that to public service and fire in the other category. And then another item of significance to note would be section 8. This is the CARES Act funding along with the Arts Fund. So you can see that the budget there was not originally known when we prepared the budget original appropriation amendment for council back in February and March. So that is a large increase to the budget, but it is all funded. More than happy to go over each line in detail, or if you have a specific question, we'd be more happy to address it.
One other item I'll cover is that we are appropriating if you remember, council passed, we did a bond issuance for the STEAM system to fund a number of projects related to adding additional customers onto the STEAM system. So we are appropriating those dollars, that bond issuance has been performed, and now we're appropriating those dollars so that we could pass them through to Akron Energy Systems to do those improvements.
Now, if I remember correctly, Mr. Fricker, that program is fully paying for itself. Is that correct?
Right. So the improvements that we make are going to be improvements that will bring additional revenues into the system. So yeah, the customer contracts that we receive as a result of hooking those customers up onto the system, those additional revenues will repay the debt service on the bonds.
Okay. Are there any other questions from committee members?
I'm not sure if you can see, but Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Yeah, please. I don't see any hands.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker and Ms. Donnell. Just a couple of specific questions. First, section 7, which I believe 1.35 million from the unappropriated balance to police. I know that in the memo it mentioned several different different programs and grants that these are going towards, including gun violence reduction, the sexual assault kit initiative. Could we get a breakdown of what is going to each of those?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then section 9, the 5 million for the CARES Act.
One thing I want to point out is I think maybe the memo is off by one section from the ordinance, but so section 9, so the 5 million is not the CARES Act. That would be those are the appropriations from the STEAM system costs.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So is section 10 the CARES Act?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be the one that's $27 million, and that's as we'll cover in the presentation. That's the total CARES Act allocation that Akron has received.
Okay, and then the final question I think was section 11, which is 4.5 million, I believe, for the State Street and Main Street Bridge. Can we talk about that a little bit?
So those are costs for the Main Street, State Street project that, as you remember, most of those are funded primarily by grants. So those are dollars that we're appropriating for those costs that have been incurred this year.
Okay. And so we didn't think that we would get to that this year, and
we weren't quite sure with some of the timing of those dollars, correct?
Okay. All right, great, thank you. And so if there could be the breakdown of the police supplemental appropriations, that'd be helpful.
You also asked for a breakdown of the CARES funds, did you not?
Yes, but I think we're going to cover that in.
Yeah, we will cover the distribution of the CARES dollars in the presentation.
Okay, just a moment. Okay. Are there any other questions for community members? Sarah, can you still?
I'm looking now. I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Are there council members who would like to ask a question? No hands?
No hands.
Okay. Hearing none. Mr. Fricker, what is your pleasure? for
Consent
these
agenda is fine.
items? Okay. May I have a motion for consent, please?
So moved.
It's moved by Councilwoman Baylor. Is there a second?
Second.
Bardo. All in.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. The third item we have. Hold on a minute. I'm dealing with two phones here. Okay, the third item is ordinance approving and authorizing the expenditure of $10,000 previously designated for the Akron City Council for travel, the purchase of one-year subscriptions of the Balancing Act Pro, taxpayer receipt, and meeting mode software as approved in ordinance number 100-2018, declaring an emergency. Councilman
Chair, I'm going
Neal, are you?
to defer to Councilman Neal on this piece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fricker.
Are you here, Councilman Neal?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fricker. This piece of legislation is one that was actually passed as is stated in the ordinance, passed by council some maybe 3 years ago now, 2018, where we had discussed about putting the city's budget online. Council passed it. The company that we've identified has offered us a 30 to 45 day free trial, and they've offered to assist us in putting in the information into the software. The challenge that we had, and I appreciate the conversations Mr. Fricker and I have had, is that the finance department didn't have the staff to enter the information. And with them installing their new software, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fricker, they're even more taxed.
That is correct, yeah.
But he did say they can make the information available. And again, the company offered to install the information for us. In light of the conversations that have taken place within our city, where grassroots organizations have asked for us to look at ways on how to fund preventative measures to address the violence in our community, this tool would be a good resource. What this is asking is, they're going to give us a free trial, but we have to have a source identified by which to pay for it if council chooses to go forward with this tool. It would be unfair for us to engage the community, for them to invest their time and resources, if we're not willing to give them a purchase order that we could move forward on. Now, Mr. Fricker, when he was the treasurer and Ms. Diane Miller-Dawson was in his position, along with our budget chair, they sat in a presentation that was supposed to last, I think, 15 minutes, ended up lasting an hour. And they saw value in the program. I think since it's been such a long time, it would be good to have the developer of Balancing Act, Mr. Chris Adams. I know Miss Councilwoman Amobian has spoken with him directly, to give a presentation to this council. We could possibly reach out to a city like in Austin, Texas, that has used this to address how they allocate their COVID-19 dollars. and engage their community, because like ours, they've been asked to look at ways to be proactive and engage in the community. And he has a best practice case study on his website in regards to that. And last but not least, our state legislators, State Rep Tavia Galansky, Minority Leader Amelia Sykes, and Senator Verna Sykes, every year give a presentation on the state budget using the state's online budgeting tool to explain how the state's allocation is expensed every year. They come into the community and give that tool. So in light of where we sit right now with COVID-19, and we're doing all this virtual, to have an online tool that we could use to see what we're doing, and a part of the charter in regards to us doing the budget is citizen engagement. Citizens are supposed to have an input on the budget. This tool would give us another resource by which to do that. So again, this is legislation that council passed some years ago. I know it was a different council. So out of respect for the new members, I think it would be good to, again, have a presentation with Mr. Adams, have our colleagues on the state level share how they utilize the tool, take into consideration the discussion that's taking place in our community by the public, by wanting to be engaged, and take advantage of the 30 to 45 day trial to see if, in fact, this is a tool that we want to use. So I'll leave it there and answer any questions that someone may have.
Okay, Mr. Neal, I'm trying to remember, at the time that we asked Mr. Adams to allow us to do the trial, are we locked into any kind of
You broke up on,
contract?
no, ma'am. No, again, it's a 45, it's a 30 to 45 day free trial.
Okay. And the other question I have, well, it's not a question, it's a comment. Actually, because of COVID, we do have money in the budget because we are not traveling physically, but some of us are doing virtual meetings, which are totally inexpensive. And this is something that I think we learned about this through NLC, wasn't it? Through NLC?
Actually, I think you and I both may have taken a class. I took an actual class learning best government budget practices. And this just happened to be one of the tools. There's other tools. There's I believe Mr. Fricker is familiar with open.gov. They have an online budgeting tool as well. But this company has made an offer to the free trial to help us install the software. And something I would encourage, I know it's difficult for many members to travel and take classes, but it would be good for us to not just install a budgeting tool, but to possibly even collectively take a budgeting class to understand, because as we move forward, all communities are challenged with their budgets, and there are best practices and tools that people are using and creative things that they are doing with their CDBG funds that I think would be good for all of us on council to have insight on.
Well said. Thank you very much. Council members, committee members, are there any questions? Sarah, I can't see any hands. Can you?
I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Council members who are on the call, are there any questions?
I do see Councilman Fusco's hand is raised, Councilwoman Amobian. Mr.
Fusco, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Mobian. This is something that, as Mr. Neal had mentioned before, has been brought forward to City Council and has been addressed actually a few times over the last several years. And I know some of the new members may not be fully aware of all that. Part of the situation and the problem is the installation of all this and making sure that it gets done and it gets done properly. I don't think we would want anyone coming in and looking at our numbers and installing something. I think it needs to be someone that actually works with these on a day-to-day basis, that is a city employee. And right now, I don't know if we have the resources due to the fact that we're all kind of stretched pretty thin. And that was part of the problem a few years ago. I'm not saying all, but part of it. But I think it's also very important to note that, and I know everyone's aware that we have the online, we have reports, we have open books online, we have an annual report. You can look at the capital, you can look at the operating budget, you can look at our quarterly income expense side, you can look at it from a quarterly, from a monthly. Actually, you can look at it from a daily standpoint in terms of the income side, and I believe the expense side as well. So this information is already basically out there for those that wish to view it online. This would be redundant. And so I guess I'm just saying that I don't see how this would be a benefit. Previous councils also had turned this down in the past as well. So that's where I stand on this, and I'd like to recommend. I'm not on the committee, but I know this would be a challenge for us to do this. It would be redundant. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I address that?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Neal.
Okay. Well, to Mr. Fusco's point, again, our finances are public record. As he mentioned, open checkbook, all this information is online. But if any of you understand, there's a difference between a budgeting forecasting tool and a checkbook register. If any of you have used any kind of accounting software, if you happen to have a small business, you have tools that allow you to see if you take money from one department and move it to another, how it impacts your overall budget. A checkbook register doesn't do that. And Mr. Fusco, yes, this council, the old council, passed the legislation for us to put the budget online. The challenge was the funding. There was a challenge with installation, but since all this information is public record, as you mentioned, it is already online. We have a group. I had a conversation with Minister Ray Green from Freedom Block, who's been very engaged with many of you here on this virtual call, as well as our administration and other grassroots organizations. They are willing to be engaged in putting the information online. I'm sure if you ask many of you, because many of the folks I've ran into on the street are not all in my ward. There are people from your ward who have this skill set, would love to be engaged in helping us move our city in this way. Folks, this is 2020. We just talked about how it's important for the police department to have certain tools, computers and technology so they could do their job. As a council, it makes it very difficult for us to say, turn to page 246 and then turn to page 3 and see how we could put together some type of budget. This is a tool, and I'm not saying if any of you have your smartphones. Some people just use their smartphone to make phone calls and do emails and texts. Other people do their banking, their accounting, trade their personal investment portfolios, do airline tickets. It's a tool. And the tool is only as good as the person that's using it. That's why I say it's critical for us to raise our level of understanding of the tools that are out there that are helping councils move their communities forward by taking the class. This isn't something that I'm saying we have to rush into, but we do need a tool. To think that we could have 13 members address the issues and concerns that impact our budget without any kind of tool is not logical. This will give us an opportunity for a free trial to see if this tool works. If not, we'll look for something else. But whatever we do, we have to have a line item in the budget. And this is where we are now, we have a line item.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Are there any questions by committee members?
Councilwoman Amopian, I know you're not able to see everybody, so I apologize for interrupting here, but I can see that Councilman Lombardo and Councilman Malik and Councilman Kamer all have their hands raised.
Okay, let's start with Lombardo. And then
Yes,
the next one will go with Councilman Malik.
Nick, turn that lower. Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to say I don't really care if it's a free trial or not. I just think at the end of the day, I don't think there's many citizens that are out there going to use this tool to investigate the city's budget. I just believe in the office of the finance director, Mr. Fricker and Shelley Gridrich. I think they're doing a fine job with the resources that they have and presenting to council the information that we need to know. So thank you.
Okay.
If I may address Mr. Lombardo. Mr. Lombardo, this is not saying that
Mr. Neal, hold up. And
Okay.
let me go to Malik and Kamer, and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I just want to address this question, Madam Chair.
We'll get to that. Just hold
Okay.
on. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Neal. I know this has come up in the past and have been aware of some of those debates. I do think that, when we do see a lot, I'm not sure that I agree with Mr. Lombardo's suggestion about usage. I think as of right now, if we did a 30 or 45-day free trial tomorrow, we might not have folks use it. But I do believe there's interest in learning more and interest in dissecting the city's budget. The Devil Strip did a long article about the policing budget, and a lot of folks read that. A lot of folks reached out to me about that. I think that there's a lot of room to talk about participatory, citizen engagement in budgeting. I think that when we even go back to there's even room to talk about, our own role in budgeting when we go back to the spring and, it's not significant amendments that we ourselves make to the budgeting process. With that being said, I think, it is important that any kind of engagement be done thoughtfully and be done in a way that will be successful. And, I think it's clear that City Council doesn't have the capacity to do that kind of engagement on our own. It sounds like, from my understanding, that this is a program that, the Finance Department is not willing to support. Mr. Fricker, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but, it sounds like the option here the best option is to, find a program or find some kind of partnership and create a plan that City Council and the Finance Department could move forward with collaboratively and productively, rather than, trying to do a free trial of something that the Finance Department and, as of right now, Council isn't, clearly supportive of.
Yeah, if I could address that, our position throughout this entire debate about the balancing act software is just that we don't really have the capacity from a staffing standpoint to have an additional piece of software imposed upon us. And that's even doubly true now with the Workday implementation that we're doing, that I can tell you that is taking literally 75 to 80% of the resources of our staff. Most of our key manager positions are, that is the primary function that they're undertaking right now. So, again, that's been our primary concern with this software all along. It's just that we do not have the bandwidth to really devote to taking on yet another piece of software.
Mr. Kamer, wait, hold on. Ms. Councilwoman Baylor, did you have your hand up?
No. Not
Okay. Councilman Kamer.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Like my colleague said, this is 2020, and we do need a tool. And right now, obviously, National League of Cities, I planned on traveling to Tampa Bay this year, but obviously it's not going to happen because of COVID. But we do need a tool. We need a tool to help out our residents in Akron. And right now, I don't think this is how we need to use our travel budget to help them out. We have businesses closing down. We have our constituents losing their jobs. We also, took away the recycling fee for our sanitation customers. So this is not the wise move to use our travel funds for right now in 2020. I think we as council should sit back. The holidays are coming up, and we should really think about how we should use any travel funds to help out the citizens of Akron, instead of using this funding for something that I don't think really a small amount of constituents will use. So I'm not in favor of it. I'm not on the committee, but I just think we as council should just sit back and evaluate how, we should maybe use our funds for the travel budget. I know previous years we've contributed to Akron Cares, and I'm hoping that leadership will look at the possibility of how we can help out our citizens with our travel budget if we want to use some of those funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other council members? Mr. Neal, I'm coming back to you. Are there other council members wanting to address this issue? Can you see any other hands, Sarah?
I do not see any other hands right now.
Okay, I'd just like to make a comment before I ask Mr. Neal to comment. When we passed this, we gave the reason that we didn't have the money in the budget. We didn't have staff time. And we continue to repeat those issues. It's the same thing as we look at public safety. Every time we turn around, and a lot of stuff we're uncovering now are questions that we've asked over the years, particularly when we talk about the position that Mr. Young holds, because I've been asking every year almost, the staffing and lack of staffing, what this program is really supposed to do, and be make excuses not want to understand the budget, which is the most important job we have, is understanding the city's budget and overseeing it, because they present the budget to us to approve, and we should know where every dollar is going. And I know we can always get that information from the finance staff. There's no question about that. But I think one thing I learned about these tools that I learned from NLC is that you learn more and more. And it's not that these people don't deal with budgets, city budgets all the time. That's pretty much what their business is. That's why they go around to all these different cities to help them with their budgets. So this is the work that they do. It would just be a wonderful opportunity just to have him come and talk to us about what this tool could do for us and with us. So I don't want to make excuses. If we can afford it, and it looks like we can, and if we sound like we don't have the votes, but I still support it and I still believe in it. And to have budgetary information in different areas is not like having it all together and understanding when we move a dollar from this line item to another, the impact that it has on things. So I think it's so important that one day that we have something that council members can use to fully understand the budget that we are elected to oversee. So with that said, Mr. Neal, you may have the last comment, and then we will take a vote. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, the reason why I brought this back, I mean, if council members, as Ms. Amobian stated, the most important responsibility we have is overseeing the budget. This is not, as Mr. Fricker said, this isn't anything to disparaging to them. This is so that we, as legislators, a separate branch of government, can understand how to best do our job and overseeing the budget. This is so that we as legislators can address one of the main concerns from all of our constituents about finding ways to be more proactive in engaging our communities. Folks, don't think that we can have a conversation about reimagining public safety or reimagining parks or reimagining anything without understanding how it's going to impact the budget. This gives us a tool so that, one, all of us can have an understanding, and then we can engage our constituents and they can play a role in this as well. the thing that I think concerns me is that we're talking about a free trial, an opportunity for us to educate ourselves on the tool to see if it works. More importantly, to address Mr. Fusco's concern, we have citizens that are willing to take their information. Again, all of our finances are public information. As Mr. Fusco stated, it's out there on the checkbook register. Citizens could get a copy of the paper budget by putting this online. And again, if this body chooses to move forward, we would be able to not only educate ourselves, but engage our constituents in seeing how other cities have used community engagement to see how citizens want to spend money when it comes to that re-engagement process. So, obviously it falls on this council. I think the thing I like about what we do now is that our conversations are documented. Our constituents can see where we're positioned on addressing their most immediate concern and all of the protests and things that took place and in citizen engagement. And as Councilman Malik spoke to, they want to be engaged in this reimagining process. This tool gives us the ability to engage them, educate them, as well as educate ourselves.
So thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions or concerns before we take a motion?
Councilwoman Amobian, I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Mr. Malik, please.
Yeah, just, echoing that, I appreciate the comments made by everyone, but to me, I think that there's a lot of need for public engagement. I represent one voice on this council, but ultimately it has to be done in partnership with the city administration. And, I think that we're coming up on next year's budget season is going to be before us very quickly. I think it would be appropriate to put together a plan for public engagement. If we flipped a switch on this free trial tomorrow, it would not, there's not a plan for how we would do effective outreach from all of the council members, right? There's not consensus clearly among us. There's clearly not consensus. And so I guess I would, with that, I can't support this, but I would ask if I could, Mr. Fricker, whether there would be openness to, finding some path forward in terms of broadening public engagement. There are a lot of different tools we can look at. I understand that a lot of resources are monopolized by the Workday implementation, by the purchasing agent work, and a lot of different things. But is that something that we could work and collaborate on to, create a plan, create a strategy?
One of the things that we've talked about as part of the Workday implementation is the fact that the information creation capabilities of Workday, far exceed what we have now. So, I think we have stated that we do plan to try to develop more, more detailed communications with regards to, the financial data that's produced by our system. And we think that Workday will allow us to do that.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
To Mr. Malik's point, Mr. Malik, this is not, I've been in conversation with Mr. Fricker this whole time. This is not an adverse situation here. Again, you make it seem like this is adverse to the administration. Mr. Fricker stated his department is understaffed. We have citizens that are willing to help, as well as the company itself, to install this software so that we can have, as you said, a free trial so that we can learn about the software from other cities. We can use the free trial so that we can put together a plan. And before even our free trial, we can have the company come in and share how it's being used by others so that we can develop a plan. This is not an adverse, coerced situation. This has been 3 years. Any of the older members had an opportunity to bring in something new over those 3 years. 3 years. This is an opportunity for us to learn, to be educated, And then if we decide, go forward. But to your point, if anything we start now, we really wouldn't have up and running until right about the time that it would benefit us, our budget process, which would be the end of January, possibly the beginning of February. So this is a tool that would help us.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. May I have a motion, please?
I'm sorry,
No,
Councilwoman Amobian, Councilman Lombardo has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, and I see Councilwoman Baylor also does.
Okay, please, guys, forgive
No.
me. I'm on my iPhone and I can only see so much. So, Mr. Lombardo, and then Councilwoman Baylor, please.
Yes, I just wanted to make that motion for disapproval. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Baylor.
I just wanted to say that I'm listening to the conversation and being new, at this, and certain variables and parts I don't have complete understanding of or about, but I can clearly see that we're not ready to move forward on this. It's like we're not at consensus with that. And I don't know the financial aspect of it. I'm listening and learning, and Mr. Fricker and what Councilman Malik was saying. There needs to be something put together that we can have consensus on. So I don't know how you do that or what all that entails, but right now I can totally say I don't think we're ready to do anything right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other hands, Sarah?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you so much. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Mr. Lombardo made a motion. Is there a second to his motion? Seeing none, may I have another motion?
I think that, given that isn't consensus, but, that there is some need to continue talking about public engagement, I would make a motion for time.
Is there a second to Mr. Malik's motion? There's no second to either. I'll second Mr. Malik's motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Roll call, Sarah, please.
Sure. Amobian,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Lombardo.
Nay.
Okay. That motion passes 3-1.
Thank you very much. Is that all for the committee?
I believe the finance department also has a presentation that they're going to share.
That's right. Thank you so much.
So
Sure.
Ms.
Okay,
Goodrich
turn it over to
has
Ms.
a PowerPoint that she is going to bring up here.
Okay.
All right. Can you guys all see that?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Can you make it big?
All right.
Okay, there it is.
All right, I'm going to touch on what the city has done to assist our businesses and citizens as we go through this difficult time and we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Once we get farther along in the presentation, Steve's going to touch on the CARES Act dollars and give a little budget update. So just wanted to briefly talk about Akron Cares. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mayor went out and secured a large donation for Akron Cares. Due to this large donation and other fundraising efforts, the city had around $750,000 on hand to assist Akron customers with. The city loosened eligibility of the program. We raised the income eligibility to 300% of the federal poverty level and added a qualifier that any individual who had been negatively impacted by COVID-19 could apply for assistance. And we've been very generous in our application of those qualifications because we want to help as many people as possible. As you can see, residents can apply at akronohio.gov/Akron Cares. We also launched an online website to be able to expedite getting applications and processing those. We also, in July of 2020, sent a postcard to all 7,000 delinquent accounts that at that point we showed were struggling to pay their bills. Before we started to do disconnections, we definitely wanted to get the word out to our residents that this program was available. So from July 2020 through the present date, the city has approved 1,978 Akron Cares applications. This totals $346,150 in Akron Cares assistance that has been dispersed to Akron customers. We continue to have funds available. I have a flyer that I can give you guys that you can pass out or provide to your residents, but continue to refer people to this program as we continue to assist people that are struggling to pay their water bills. The city also worked in collaboration with United Way to provide training to all our CSRs on the free financial empowerment center and the financial counseling that they offer at that center. In addition to CSRs referring customers based on phone calls, the Akron Cares application asks if the customer wants to engage in free financial counseling and provides certain incentives if they decide to. This process was modeled after the NLC Lift Up program. Back in June, we met with the city of Houston as well as Denise Belzer, program director for the NLC, to appropriately structure the program after other municipalities that have had success in this arena. Through this initiative, the city has referred 30.7% of all Akron Cares applications to the Financial Empowerment Center for free financial coaching. So that's 740 individuals that we have referred for this wonderful resource in our community. The financial coaches are working to assist customers to set up payment plans with the Akron Utility Bureau, as well as obtain penalty waivers on their accounts. I sent to you guys a map that kind of mapped out who had received assistance through the Akron Cares program. I couldn't really put it on a PowerPoint slide, it was too small, but here's also a breakdown by ward. So you can see the highest ward that has utilized the program is Ward 4. The lowest ward is Ward 1. And like I said, reference that map that I sent to your emails that actually shows it mapped out, across your wards. The city also partnered with the chamber on the Small Business Emergency Relief Grant Program. The amount of grants was up to $5,000 per business. There have been 3 rounds, 1 and 2 have completed. Round 3 is in process. And you can see from the next slide, the Akron statistics for round 1 and 2. So 1,186 Akron businesses applied, 852 were awarded grants. And you can see we had a number of MBE, WBE, and businesses located in a job hub or low to moderate income area. So we had a lot of representation in those rounds. Round 3 is currently ongoing. You can see the preliminary statistics. 747 of the 1,708 total applications are from Akron businesses. Akron businesses have requested $3.35 million from the available grants. The city of Akron has worked very closely with the chamber because the businesses have to be up to date in their taxes in order to qualify for the grants. So we have been diligently working with the chamber to check tax delinquencies, assisting businesses in getting their taxes current or on a payment plan in order for them to qualify for the grants. So there's definitely been a lot of legwork for this program between the chamber, the city of Akron, and the city of Akron Tax Department. Summit County Cares has also been another assistance program that the city has collaborated on with the Summit County Department of Job and Family Services, other municipalities, and community organizations. This program provides assistance for rent, mortgage, and/or utilities. Round 1 was completed in July, August timeframe, and a second application period was opened at the end of September. The city worked very closely, and our utility bill department collaborated with the legal aid and Summit County, on Summit County Cares, there was a lot of people that were facing eviction. Some of these evictions were due to delinquent utilities, in part also to delinquent rent and mortgage. So we worked very closely with legal aid on providing documentation, stopping turnoffs of customers who had applied for the program while the program was being processed. You'll see that in round one, which was in July and August, a total of 2,593 Akron accounts had their total balance paid in full through this program. This resulted in over $325,000 worth of Akron utility bills being paid in full. And we also expect a similar representation on this second round. The first round, I think people had to be behind on their mortgage or rent in order to qualify. This round, Summit County is also allowing people to apply who are just behind on their utilities, but not necessarily behind on their mortgage or rent. So we will continue to collaborate with them, pulling account balances, working very closely hand in hand to make sure these individuals do not get their utilities terminated, and that we continue to work and help get these bills paid through the CARES Act dollars that our county has received. So Steve's going to go ahead and talk on the CARES Act funding and the budget.
All right, so when we talked earlier this year, I believe it was in June when we gave the previous update, at that time, approximately $16 million of CARES Act funding had been allocated towards the city of Akron. Since that time, an additional $11 million has been allocated. So there were 4 total pots of money, all of which follow the guidelines of use that the CARES Act designated at the federal level. So we have to comply with all 4 of these pots of money with the CARES Act guidelines. So as we appropriated the budget today, we appropriated $27 million amongst 2 different funds. One was the local coronavirus relief fund, and that houses 3 of the different sources that we just saw. Shall I get you back up one?
Yep,
Yeah.
I did. Sorry.
So all of those 4 pots of money, 3 of them are going into the local coronavirus relief fund, and then the $8 million was for the Summit County Payroll Support Program. But all 4 of them follow the CARES Act guidelines that we have to follow. Okay, let's go to the next slide there. So as we talked about, the county structured this, so we are still submitting all of our costs through the county for all this. We've already submitted the $8 million in payroll costs for the payroll support program. We'll be submitting additional costs here over the next couple months, but we, as we submit those safety force related labor costs, we will be able to draw the entire $27 million. Okay, and here's a brief update of kind of where we expect to end up as a city this year. So we have reduced our expenditures from last year. So we expect to spend about $7 million less this year than we did last year. And as I'm going to cover in a couple minutes, the expenditures reductions that we've done in our contractual and materials areas actually kind of exceed that quite a bit. You know, the reason why it's only going down 7 million instead of about 20 million from the savings that we've generated is because we did have some additional debt service that we had to pay out of our sewer fund, and that was largely related to the Ohio Canal Interceptor Tunnel. So just that one project alone, we had to pay about $12 million of debt this year that we didn't have last year. So we'll see that in a minute, that we've reduced our contractual and materials expenses about $20 million, but that's been somewhat offset by higher debt service costs. And on the revenue side, I would expect that we would have just slightly less revenues that we had last year, but that's helped in large part by the $27 million of CARES Act funding that we've received. So as we'll cover here in a minute, we will see reductions in a number of key revenue categories, the highest of which is income tax. So we would expect to see about a $4 to $5 million reduction in our income taxes And then when you look at that on a budgetary basis, when we budgeted for about a 2.25% increase on a budgetary basis, that's north of $6 million in terms of the budgetary hit that we're taking with our income tax. One of the ramifications of that is that we recently received a downgrade from one of the 3 rating agencies. And they cited the impact of COVID as the primary reason for doing that. So our Standard & Poor's rating, which previously was a AA minus, they lowered our rating one notch down to an A+ rating. And that puts us at the same rating that so there's 3 rating agencies. Fitch already had us as an A+, they've had us there for a couple of years, and S&P lowered us down to that A+ rating. And then we continue to have a AA3 rating with Moody's. But that's one of the primary impacts of the revenue losses that we're seeing, is that it creates some uncertainty from our revenues. And then we did receive that downgrade from Standard & Poor's. Okay, and I think a little bit of this is getting cut off, but so I mentioned, and I want to explain something, is we're going to see 2 different numbers for our income tax decline. This is the amount that's reflected on our accounting system. It's actually a little bit higher than that right now in terms of the negative growth, and that's due to, there's a little bit of a lag between our income tax reporting system and what actually makes it into our banner system. There's a little bit of a lag there. So this is showing us down only about 2%, when in reality we're down a little bit more than that. Actually, right now we're down about 2.75%. But we're also seeing some reductions in a couple other key areas. The JED obviously is also income tax, so that is also taking a hit. And I think because it's more of a kind of a retail-based tax, with how the JED districts, how the employment functions within those districts, it's seeing a little bit more of a hit than Akron has received. The property tax, although it did decline slightly, we're pleased to see that for the most part, it was a very slight decline, and the property tax collections remain fairly stable this year. You also see a little bit of that impacted on the assessment collections, which largely mirror the property tax collections. Obviously, the hospitality sector has been hit quite a bit. So while it's not a huge source, you can see, the hotel tax on a percentage basis took a huge hit this year. Another key area that is taking a big hit, kind of along the same lines, is the casino revenue that we get from the state. So typically we get 4 quarterly distributions, each of which is about $800,000. So the first 2 distributions we got were pretty much there. They declined slightly, but then the 3rd distribution was only about $50,000. So, and that reflects the closing of those casinos due to COVID. So we expect that the impact from the casino revenue decline will be north of $1 million this year. Okay, then on the expense side, as I mentioned, we have reduced our expenses, and you can see that in that 3rd category, which is the bulk of that's where our contracts and our contracts and our materials and supplies are. We've reduced that by about $14 million, but that's been largely offset by the increased debt service that we had to pay. That COVID or not, you have to pay your debt obligations. So we did take, we did have a large increase in expenditures there. And then here's a comparison of our tax collections. And the big thing that we've seen with our tax collections is that we got off to a very good start with our collections. So, kind of pre-COVID in the first 3 months, we had increased collections over last year, and we were in a fairly good place. Then we had the huge declines. And a big part of the decline was the fact that they had moved the personal filing deadline back from April to July. And so a number of people that typically pay their taxes when they file their annual return waited until July to pay that. So we saw a large dip, from April through July, and then we saw quite a bit of a recovery in July, and that was because we had all those people that were making those payments, for their individual returns that came in July. And then since then, it kind of stabilized, and now we're seeing a little bit of a downturn again, and that's largely due to the fact that companies, during this period of the year are paying their net profit returns. And because, they're anticipating, fewer net profits than they typically would have, we're going to expect to see those revenues dip a little bit. So what we've seen is, we saw a large decline, it recovered somewhat, and then we're seeing a little bit of a decline again that I think we'll see a kind of a very gradual decline between now and the end of the year, but not as obvious as what we saw in the spring months of the year. And then here's a quick look at kind of where we're collecting our tax. So if you see in terms of withholding tax, which is our biggest portion of the tax, and that reflects the employees that work within the city of Akron, there's only been a very slight decline, about 0.4%. But those net profits, that's where we're seeing a larger decline in our tax base. And again, I think we expect that to continue for the rest of the year on a gradual basis. And just to show you kind of what that means, this is if you look at last year's collections, this is the percentage of taxes that we collect from each category. So one of the concerns going forward into next year is that we would expect that this trend would continue in the next year, where the net profit tax would be one that we would continue to see some decline in over the next year or two, because as many economists have noted, they expect this to be kind of a long-term recovery from this COVID. So we're not going to bounce back to 100% at the end of this year or even early next year. It's going to be more of a gradual recovery. So that's kind of an update. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council members have.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker, and thank you, Mrs. Goodrich. Question I have, I talked with you about this some time ago, Mr. Fricker. Can you show us the impact, and it may be small, the home-based workers are having on our taxes? Because you explained it to me because I couldn't understand why that would be a problem, but you did explain to me, so you might want to explain to council.
Right, so during the period of COVID, the state passed an emergency mandate that says that if employees typically work within a particular city and they are now working from home, and maybe in a different jurisdiction altogether, that the company had to continue to withhold that tax for the work city. So, that was beneficial to Akron and the larger cities because we didn't lose that tax base when all those employees were working from home. So the concern is if that, if the state lifts that kind of mandate that the employers continue to pay into the work city, and if we have more people working from home, then that will have a negative impact on our tax base. So that's one of the kind of the big concerns long-term that we have, is that there will be kind of a reshuffling of where income tax is collected from, the larger urban cities like Akron to suburban locations as more people work from home.
I have two more questions, and I'm going to turn to the committee members. Would this presentation be online for citizens or anyone else to see?
We can make it available to everyone, yes.
Yes, that'd be great. Mrs. Goodrich, when you talked about the first slide of the Akron Cares, that is the program that includes the contributions of the city employees. Can you talk about that second paragraph of how much we've spent in that program? How far back are we going with that amount?
Well, that's been since July of 2020. So we constantly have raised and spent money all along. I think we went into this year with a very small balance. We got a grant donation actually, I think in December of last year. The mayor was able to procure a large donation once COVID started. we continue to collect money from multiple other sources. So from city employees that do dress down day, people can donate on their bills. There's a house line insurance program that we make some revenues on that goes into the Akron Cares program. So there is a multitude of avenues that we bring in income for that program. I would say the most is definitely from a large grant that we got at the end of last year. And then, like I said, the mayor was able to secure a large donation to help people that have been impacted by COVID. So we started out, when we relaunched the program in July, we had about 750,000 on hand. And so far we've given away 346,000. So we still have quite a bit available to give away. So we encourage people to apply. It's a one-time $175 credit to their bill. They just have to show that they've been impacted by COVID, or they're on Summit County homestead exemption, or they're 300% of the federal poverty level, or there's one more qualifier. So I apologize. I came up with this program, but I can't think of the final qualifier. But we've made it very easy for people to apply. They can apply online, they can call, they can get an application, and our CSRs have been processing those and applying credits to the accounts. We have approved the majority of the applications that have come through. So we definitely, it's only if someone truly does not give us any kind of documentation or does not make an attempt to fill out most of the application that they would not be approved.
A couple more questions, then I'm gonna turn over to committee members for sure. The first question is, when we talk about supporting individuals when paying their utilities, is this all citizens or businesses and citizens?
So it's Akron residents. So
Okay.
it can be a business if they're struggling to pay. We traditionally see that it's residents, individuals that are applying for the program.
Good. And the last question I have, some of these businesses that have gone out of business, like I think it's the Gus restaurant, the one over there on Talmadge, that recently announced they were closing. Have they reached out for any help from us before they close? These are generally restaurants and have been around for years and years. And it's just sad that they're closing, but I'm sure they don't have the revenue to stay afloat.
I can tell you that we've done a lot of training with our CSRs since I've started. We want our CSRs to definitely be giving them resources within the community to potentially help, whether that's the Chamber, United Way. We're definitely making them aware of the resources that are available. We're offering payment plans. So we used to do payment plans on a much shorter timeline. Since COVID has occurred, we've loosened those guidelines. So we're allowing residents and business owners to do longer payment plans for their any delinquencies that they may have. I mean, we're trying to be as flexible as possible in responding to, the struggles that everyone is having due to the pandemic. So, if they had reached out, we definitely would. Our CSRs have been trained, to work with them and to refer them to any resources that they're aware of within the community for potential assistance. Everything that we get about these programs, like the Akron Chamber Business Grant Program, we're providing to the CSR so that they can attempt to link people within the community with these other programs like Summit County Cares. We trained them on that so that they could refer people to that program during the open application period. So we're doing everything that we can to equip our customer service reps to be able to respond compassionately to the residents and to be able to refer them to other places if we're not able to help them. But in most cases, we can provide assistance through the Akron Cares program.
Well, thank you so very much for reaching out and for all that you're
doing. And I'll send you guys all a flyer that we had created that is very quick, like the qualifications that you can even pass out to your constituents. I'll go ahead and send that out after we get off the call because we still, like I said, we still have money to give away and, to help people. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you're doing. Sarah, whose hands are up?
I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Okay, Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Goodrich, Mr. Bricker. I had 3 questions, I think. The first is kind of general. I appreciate the kind of overview of where we are in terms of the different line items of revenue and expense. As we look at next year, how do you see this impacting our budget for next year? You know, were some of these cuts that we made one-time cuts, or, you know, and what do we foresee revenue doing next year as well? And then also, you know, I know that federal funding is kind of a big elephant in the room, and when and whether there's going to be federal stimulus for local and state governments. So sort of how are you thinking through those things?
I think we're looking at next year, as I mentioned during the presentation, that we expect to continue to see challenges next year with revenues. We also have some challenges on the expense side for next year. So as you know, that we are this will be the 3rd year of a 3-year labor agreement where we're scheduled to have 3% cost of living increases for 2021. And in addition to that, next year, just due to the way that the payroll calendar falls, we'll have 53 weekly payrolls. So there's we have a couple challenges next year with related to increased costs. The way we are looking at things is we are going to continue to kind of monitor labor cost. Will be very conservative when it comes to budgeting for additional people. We're going to try to, if there's vacancies, each of them will be given some consideration in terms of whether or not we fill it again. So, all of those things that we typically do will be things that we look at. I apologize, my dog is getting a little restless here. So one of the other things that, given where we are with the CARES Act funding for this year, it would appear that we would be able to, have some of that accumulate in terms of fund balance that we could then have available for next year's budget. So I think that is kind of, one of the considerations that we're giving is that depending on where we end up this year, that we would have some, additional fund balance that we accumulate this year that could be applied towards next year, the 2021 budget.
Thank you. And I think the federal stimulus point.
So the federal stimulus, we don't want to, commit dollars that we don't know whether or not we're getting them yet. So, I'm aware, and we're all aware that there has been some consideration of additional federal dollars going to state and local governments. But in terms of us right now making plans for 2021, I don't think it's appropriate to to budget for expenditures counting on that money when we don't know whether we're going to get any additional dollars or not.
Okay. The second thing was the bond rating reduction that you mentioned from S&P. I think they had, if I was correct, 3 things that they had concerns about: our reliance on income tax, which I think we talked about as a continuing issue with the potential, stay-at-home concerns, the debt burden, and our lack of reserves. So what are we doing to, prevent any further reductions or get back up one notch higher?
So I think that, the one item you mentioned about reserves is a key one. So, in terms of, the dollars that we will have this year due to the CARES Act funding, and all of it is CARES Act eligible payroll expenses. We're utilizing those dollars in accordance with the provisions of the CARES Act program. But in doing so, that will allow us to basically transfer general fund expenses, so these safety costs that we have in our general fund, to the CARES Act fund, which reduces our expenditures in the general fund, and hopefully allows us to build up some fund balance within the general fund.
And so what would what would be the ideal number of days of reserves that we would shoot to get to?
So the goal that we've always had in mind, for where our general fund is about $25 million. And typically we've been at about $10 million since we executed this cell tower lease transaction. So we were around $5 to $6 million for a number of years when we did the cell tower transaction. That allowed us to bump that up to about $10 million. Ideally, you'd want to be at about 15% of reserves, so up about $25 million.
Thank you. Well, I think my questions might be making your dog a little restless, so I all of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Mellon. Is there anybody else, Sarah, with their hands up?
See that Councilman Neal has his hand raised.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thanks to Steve and Shelley for the presentation. And this accentuates why council needs a budgeting tool. A lot of these questions that we're asking, we would be able to role play with different budgets on what the impact would be if there's a shortfall in dollars. Go back and do some of the research and see historically where there's been shortfalls or where we've sent money back so that we can plan better. So I appreciate the insight. I think in lieu of the question raised by you, Madam Chair, regarding that Mr. Fricker answered regarding stay at home and the challenges if that changes, how this extended COVID period is going to impact our tax-based revenue. We have to, as council, we have to work with the administration, have several different scenarios on how to provide services and improve, still maintain a certain level of services under different scenarios. And so we have to have the tools to be able to do that. So I just wanted to say, I appreciate the conversation, but it highlights why it's important for us to use best government budgeting practice tools so that we can be able to, best utilize the information we're provided with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neal. Are there any other hands up, Sarah?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you so much, Sarah, because I tell you, I can't see a thing. Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Fricker and Mrs. Goodrich, for your presentation and some good, helpful information. Understand the presentation will be online, which is great. And no other business before us. I'll ask for an adjournment. May I have a motion for us to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
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 If it's moved and seconded, we are